I spent most of my childhood helping my parents in their store. People would just walk in, and I already knew whether they would leave with a purchase or simply waste our time. At first, I thought it was intuition, but over time I realized it wasn't magic. It was the ability to see what others miss because they look in the wrong direction or look in the wrong way. Over the years, I became certain of one thing: character does not hide in long conversations. It reveals itself instantly in how a person holds themselves, where their gaze goes, how they walk, how they pause, or avoid pausing. And the most important thing, the person doesn't notice it themselves. They think they are just beginning to get to know you, while you have already read them like an open book. Today, I will share with you 6 simple but powerful ways that will help you do the same. This is not theory from textbooks. This is knowledge tested by life. My life, the lives of my ancestors, generations for whom the ability to read a person was not a matter of comfort, but of survival. And at the end, I will share one technique that works every time, even when everything else fails. It reveals a person completely. A wise man once passed it on to me, and since then, I have never been wrong. You will learn this method if you watch the video until the end. But more on that later. For now, let us learn how to see. Rule 1. The way a person walks reflects their inner state. It reveals not who they want to appear to be, but who they truly are. Many believe that confidence is a loud voice, expensive clothes, refined accessories, or eloquent speech. But in reality, it is much simpler than that. All you need to do is observe how a person walks, not when they are posing or trying to impress, but in their natural environment, walking down a hallway, along a street, or entering a room. In those moments, the body tells the truth. The body shows what cannot be fabricated. You can immediately sense how much a person believes in themselves, how ready they are to carry responsibility, with what inner strength they step into the world. A confident walk does not mean a fast one. It is steady, balanced, with a slight lift of the head and relaxed shoulders. Even if a person is tired or modestly dressed, there is dignity in their movement. But someone who hesitates, who steps as if apologizing for their presence, often carries insecurity, fear of making mistakes, or a lifelong habit of being invisible. This knowledge works everywhere, at job interviews, in stores, at school. You can immediately tell who is capable of taking responsibility and who is merely speaking words with no substance behind them. On a date, you can see whether a person has an inner core or is used to adapting. In a business meeting, you will know whether partnership is possible or whether you are facing someone who will retreat, panic, disappear, and shift responsibility onto others at the first sign of pressure. I first learned this rule in childhood. My grandfather and I often went to the market with a shopping list written by my grandmother. He loved observing people and their behavior, so we could spend the entire day at the market simply watching and discussing. My grandfather used to say, "Olivia, don't look at what people wear, look at how they carry themselves." Once, a man passed by us wearing a worn-out jacket with a dim gaze and a heavy walk, as if every step required effort. I thought to myself, poor man, he must have lost his job. But my grandfather shook his head and said, "No, he isn't carrying his life. He's dragging it like a burden. Such a person won't be able to stand up for himself, let alone help someone else." A few weeks later, that same man came to our home. He asked to borrow money, spoke convincingly, promised to return everything, even swore. But I remembered his walk, and for the first time in my life, I felt that his words did not match his essence. We didn't give him the money, and we were right. He disappeared. A month later, we learned that he had borrowed money from dozens of people and never returned it. From that day on, I stopped guessing based on words. I watch how a person walks, because walking never lies. It is a mirror of the soul, and the soul does not know how to pretend. There is one simple but almost invisible test of authenticity, and it works better than any resume, recommendation, or even a personal conversation. It is not what a person says when they want to impress you. It is how they behave in different situations and with different people, especially when they believe no one is watching. Many people know how to play a role, composed in interviews, attentive on first dates, reliable and honest in negotiations. But true character reveals itself not in ideal conditions, but in inconsistency. How someone treats a waiter when they are tired, how they speak to a taxi driver who arrived late, how they respond to a colleague's request when they themselves are under pressure. Behavioral consistency means a person remains the same regardless of circumstances. They do not change their tone depending on whether someone is important or unimportant. They do not become someone else for personal gain. Such a person is like a rock. You can test them in storms, in drought, in silence. They do not crumble. Inconsistency, however, is a warning sign. If someone is kind to you but rude to a barista, that's not a bad day. It's a pattern. If they are affectionate in private but ignore you in public, that's not shyness. It's calculation. If they swear honesty in negotiations but lie in small everyday matters, sooner or later they will lie in what truly matters. This principle affects everything: who you build relationships with, who you make deals with, whom you trust with your ideas, time, and money. Because reliability is not a single act, it is sustained behavior. One kind gesture may be coincidence. 10 are character. I learned this not from books, but from life. Once a man came into my jewelry store. He introduced himself as a collector, an expert. He showed antique watches in perfect condition, spoke calmly and confidently, used the right terminology, asked intelligent questions. I thought, a rare client, someone who understands, appreciates, and respects craftsmanship. He left the watch for restoration of the gold strap. A few days later, he returned to pick it up, and he was a different person. Irritated, tapping his fingers on the counter, interrupting, demanding a discount just because. When I explained the cost of the work, he shouted, "You're just ripping people off." I stayed silent, but internally, everything fell into place. A week later, a barista from the cafe across the street came into my store and said, "You won't believe it, but the same man caused a scene here yesterday because the milk was warm, not hot, and today I saw him flattering the gallery owner, calling him maestro." That was the whole story. He wasn't a bad person. He was inconsistent. With such people, you never know what to expect. Their behavior depends not on principles, but on advantage. They are like sandcastles, beautiful under the right light, but collapsing at the first gust of wind. Since then, I stopped judging by first impressions. I look wider, across time and context. I notice how a person greets a security guard, how they thank a courier, how they behave in line when there is nothing to gain, because true character does not reveal itself on stage, it reveals itself backstage, when a person thinks no one is watching. And if you want to avoid disappointment, deception, and toxic relationships, don't ask who someone is at their best. Ask yourself, do they remain the same when it brings them nothing? Because only then do you see not a mask, but a human being. The gaze is a direct reflection of a person's soul. There is one thing that cannot be faked for long. You can control your words, you can train your gestures, you can master a perfect smile, but there's something that gives a person away instantly: their eyes. And if you learn to look not just at the eyes, but through them, you will stop misjudging people. I noticed this early on. As a teenager, all kinds of people would come into our store, rich and poor, loud and quiet, confident and unsure. And one day, I realized something strange. I could ignore what someone was saying, yet already know whether they were trustworthy. Not because they were good or bad, but because their eyes spoke louder than words ever could. At first I thought, maybe it's just intuition. Then I realized, no, it's a skill of observation. Eyes aren't merely organs of sight. They are windows to what's happening inside. A person can control their face, but their gaze moves a fraction of a second ahead of their thoughts. That's why sometimes we feel uneasy around someone, even if they say all the right things. We don't know why, but their eyes have already told us everything. I want to share a story that taught me to trust this knowledge forever. I was about 20. At that time, I worked with a woman. Let's call her Margaret. She was older, confident, calm, very persuasive. She spoke softly, offered support, listened attentively. Everyone liked her. Everyone considered her reliable. But inside, I felt a quiet tension. Nothing concrete, no facts, just a feeling. One day we were alone. She spoke about her life, her hardships, how no one helped her. Her words were perfect, her tone, sincere. But at one moment, she looked at me, and I saw emptiness, not coldness, not anger, just emptiness, as if the person was speaking about feelings, but inside, there was no one there. I asked myself for the first time, where are you right now while you're speaking to me? Here's a crucial distinction. There are present gazes, when a person is here, in the moment, in their body, and there are absent gazes, when the eyes look, but the mind is elsewhere, calculating, planning, scheming. This has nothing to do with shyness or introversion. It's about honest presence. A few months later, Margaret disappeared, simply stopped reaching out. Later, I found out she had been taking money from people, manipulating stories, playing on their sympathy, and leaving when there was nothing left to take. I wasn't shocked, only quietly confirmed my earlier feeling. I remembered her gaze. Now let's explore the types of gazes and what they reveal. The first gaze, direct, calm, not intimidating, not pressing. It can hold a pause without fear. This is how people look who don't need to prove themselves. They have an inner center of stability. With them, you can have honest dialogue, partnerships, relationships. The second gaze, darting. Eyes constantly shift side to side, up, down. It's as if the person is always searching for somewhere to hide. It's not always deceit, often fear, insecurity, a habit of being on guard. With such people, don't push, but don't expect consistency either. The third gaze, too intense, unblinking, with a sense of pressure. It's a controlling gaze. This is how people look who want to dominate, or who fear losing power. In close relationships, it becomes exhausting. It's not about connection, it's about control. Here's the second key insight. Don't watch just one moment, watch the change in the gaze. When someone speaks about something personal, are their eyes alive? When the topic shifts to gain, does their expression shift too? This is often the exact moment a person unconsciously gives themselves away. The fourth gaze, warm yet scattered. A kind, empathetic person, but often living more in emotions than in reality. It's easy to feel closeness with them, but hard to make plans or rely on them. They are sincere, but not always dependable. The fifth gaze, clear, composed, no games, no exaggeration. This is the gaze of someone who knows themselves and isn't afraid to be seen. Life with such people isn't always easy, but it's almost always honest. I ask myself one simple question when looking into someone's eyes. Do I feel life here or strategy? If you feel life, even with mistakes, fears, awkwardness, you are facing a living person. If you feel strategy, be cautious. Eyes never lie on purpose. They simply reveal what is, and if you learn to look slowly, without rushing to conclusions, without clinging to words, you'll see more than you ever could by listening alone. A person can lie with their voice, they can lie with their smile, they can lie with a story, but the gaze is always slightly behind the lie. And in that, it's truth. There's another nuance that few notice but speaks volumes, the moment of the first gaze. When you first meet someone, in a store, at a meeting, on a date, pay attention not to how long they look, but to how the gaze begins. Some look immediately, openly, calmly, not staring, not hiding. This is the gaze of someone who doesn't need to hide themselves. Others glance away first, then return sharply, as if testing. Can I be myself here? Often, these are people with past pain or rejection. With them, time matters, not pressure. Then there are those who look first, but there's no curiosity in their eyes, just assessment, scanning, cold calculation. Such a gaze doesn't linger. It's like a flashlight beam, illuminates, classifies, moves on. I've noticed this more and more with age. The more inner integrity a person has, the less tension in their eyes. They aren't afraid to be seen. They aren't afraid of silence. They aren't afraid of a pause. But people with inner conflict almost always betray themselves through their gaze. Their eyes show restlessness, as if too many voices are inside and none is in charge. I recalled another moment with Margaret. Once, after our private conversation, I noticed something strange. When she laughed, her eyes stayed still. There was a smile, there was laughter, but no warmth. That's when I realized emotions can be learned, but the gaze cannot. There's another type worth mentioning, the victim gaze, often soft, sad, eliciting sympathy. This is how people look who are used to living through pity, not necessarily consciously. You feel the urge to help, support, save, but look closer, and often there's no forward movement. It seems to say, do it for me. This doesn't make someone bad, but if you take on the rescuer role, you will soon feel drained. And there's the rarest gaze of all, the gaze of a person who is truly free inside. It doesn't cling, it doesn't demand, it doesn't test. There is calm, clarity. Such people aren't afraid you'll leave. They don't try to hold on. They look and leave the choice to you. Notice one more thing. Eyes change when a person lies. Not in the way movies show. Not necessarily darting. Not necessarily looking away. Most often, coherence is lost. Words go one way, and the eyes another. The voice is confident, but the eyes tense. At that moment, you feel it. Something's off. Don't ignore it. I often tell myself and others, you don't need to be a psychologist. You don't need to analyze. Just slow down and let the eyes speak. The gaze is not about control. It's about presence. It doesn't say, this person is bad. It says, this is where they are right now. And if you learn to see this, you will stop expecting from people what they cannot give. And that means you will stop being disappointed. My cousin once met a man. He was charming, intelligent, well-groomed, with a good job. Everyone around her said the same thing, the perfect husband. But inside, she felt uneasy. She couldn't explain why. One day she came to me and said, when he talks about love, his eyes turn cold. It's as if he's quoting a script, not speaking from his heart. I asked her to notice one thing the next time. Does he look you in the eyes when he talks about his feelings? Or does his gaze drift away, as if he's checking whether he's saying the right words? She did exactly that. Every time he said, I love you, his eyes lifted just above her shoulder, toward the mirror hanging behind her. He was watching himself, not her. She ended the relationship. A year later, he married another woman. 6 months after that, he left her, taking the apartment they had bought. With her money. This is the power of the eyes. They don't show what a person wants to give you. They show what a person is actually feeling in that very moment. That's why, when you meet someone new, don't rush to listen. Look first. Look into their eyes, not aggressively, not like a lie detector, but like someone who truly wants to see another human being. You'll be surprised how much becomes clear before a single word is spoken, because eyes are not a mirror of the soul. In a poetic sense, they are a real, functioning instrument for reading character. And the one who learns to read them will never be blind in choosing people. And this is only the beginning. Even if you learn to read posture, gaze, gestures, all of that can be faked if you don't know the most important thing. But don't worry, at the end, I'll reveal the one secret technique that works every time, even when a person is certain they have everything under control. For now, let's move on to the next key. After the eyes comes speech. Speech is not just a way to transmit information. Speech is not just words. It is a trace of thinking. It is the rhythm of a person's inner world. It is the way someone lives inside themselves, and they rarely realize how clearly it can be heard. Many people believe that what matters most is what a person says. In reality, What matters far more is how they say it. You can say all the right things and still be empty. You can stumble over words and be deeply real. You can sound beautiful and lie, or you can speak simply and carry a truth that cannot be ignored. I did not understand this right away. When I was younger, I worked in a small place where people came to negotiate about money, partnerships, futures. I listened a lot. I rarely interfered. I simply listened. One day, a man came in, smart, well-groomed, with flawless speech. He spoke smoothly, without pauses, confidently, as if he already knew what everyone would say in response. His voice was even, warm, almost soothing. He used the right words, spoke about values, honesty, trust. Everyone around him was charmed. I was cautious, not because he spoke poorly, but because his speech had no breathing space. He did not pause when the conversation turned serious. He did not slow down when talking about risk. He did not hesitate at difficult moments. His speech was too polished, like a perfectly rehearsed performance. A few months later, everything collapsed. He disappeared with the money, no explanations, no trace, as smoothly as he had spoken. That was when I understood something very clearly. Speech never lies if you listen not to the words, but to the structure. There are several things that always reveal a person. The first is rhythm. A person who is in contact with themselves speaks unevenly. They may speed up when inspired, slow down when feeling something deeply, pause when thinking. Living thought always breathes. But someone who speaks at the same pace all the time, with the same tone, the same flow, often lives in their head rather than in reality. They are controlling an image, not experiencing the moment. The second is pauses. A pause is honesty. It is the moment when a person searches for an answer, instead of pulling out a prepared line. A sincere person is not afraid of silence. They can stop, think, feel. They do not rush to fill the space with words. Lies, on the other hand, are afraid of pauses. Lies hurry. Lies fear being caught in silence. The third is intonation, not volume, not beauty, but alignment. When words say one thing and intonation says another, the body hears it instantly. Someone may say, "This matters to me," but if the voice is cold, it does not matter. Someone may say, "I'm calm," but if the tone is tense, they are lying to themselves. The fourth is simplicity. Deep people speak simply, not because they have nothing to say, but because they have nothing to prove. When speech is overloaded with complex constructions, terminology, and ornamentation, it is often not depth that stands behind it, but a desire to appear smarter than one truly is. True wisdom always sounds clear. And finally, the most important thing, consistency between speech and life. Listen to how a person speaks about their past, about people, about money, about themselves. If they are always the victim, they avoid responsibility. If they are always the hero, they avoid reality. If they constantly blame others, they are dangerous to be close to. Speech is a self-portrait. A person draws it with words every single day. Over time, I stopped listening to promises. I began listening to how a person thinks out loud, where they get confused, where they defend themselves, where they justify, where they come alive. Because thinking is audible, sincerity is audible, even fear is audible, in the way sentences are built. If you learn to listen to speech not with your ears, but with attention, you will no longer need to guess who is in front of you. A person will tell you everything. They simply do not realize that you know how to listen. One more thing. Is it a dialogue or a monologue? There is one more detail that almost no one pays attention to, yet it often reveals more than all the words combined. Does the person actually listen to you? Not nod, not pretend, but truly listen. A dialogue is always movement in two directions. It is a living exchange. It is attention not only to oneself but to the other. When a person truly hears you, you feel it immediately. They respond, not with rehearsed phrases, but with real answers. They can change their perspective if something meaningful is said. They ask clarifying questions out of genuine interest. They do not interrupt when you speak about something important. Such a person is in contact, not performing a role. Now notice the opposite. There are people who speak with you, but in reality they are speaking to themselves. You are not a conversation partner. You are a pause between their monologues. You share something personal, and they wait for their turn to talk about themselves again. You ask a question, and they redirect the conversation to where it is comfortable for them. You tell a story, and they use it as a trigger to tell their own. This is not always rudeness. More often, it is inner egocentrism, a habit of being at the center, an inability to hold space for another person's reality. And here is the most important realization. A person who does not hear you in conversation will not hear you in life. They will not hear you when you are struggling. They will not hear you when you ask for help. They will not hear you when boundaries are crossed, because for them, conversation is a stage, not a meeting. I have seen this many times, in work and in personal life. The most painful, destructive relationships did not begin with aggression, but with a subtle feeling. I am not being heard. Their speech may be beautiful, their voice confident, their words correct, but between the phrases, there is emptiness. And truly mature people are different. They know how to stay in another person's silence. They are not afraid of the pause after your words. They do not rush to take the conversation back. They want to understand, not to win. So when you listen to someone speak, listen not only to their words, but to whether you exist in that space. Because a real dialogue leaves you feeling clearer, warmer, calmer. A monologue leaves you with the sense that you are nearby, but never truly met. Key signals in a person's speech. Speech rhythm. Pay attention to whether the speech breathes. A living, present person speeds up, slows down, and takes pauses naturally. A rigid, rehearsed rhythm, the same from start to finish, often indicates someone controlling their image rather than living the moment. Signal. If the rhythm never changes, the person is more focused on appearance than authenticity. 2. Pauses. Pauses are a sign of honesty. A sincere person can stop, think, search for words. Someone insincere fears silence and fills every gap with words. Signal. If there are no pauses at all, this is often a defense or a pre-prepared script. 3. Intonation and alignment. Words and tone must match. This matters to me should sound soft and warm. I am calm should sound genuinely calm. Signal. If the body tenses while the words are correct, pay attention to the body, not just the words. 4. Simplicity of speech. Depth sounds simple. Wise people explain things clearly. Insecure people hide behind complexity. Signal. Overly complicated speech often reflects fear of appearing ordinary. 5. Does the person listen to you, dialogue or monologue? This is crucial. A listener reacts to what you say, or they wait for their turn to speak. Signal. If the conversation always returns to them after your words, it's a monologue, not dialogue. 6. How they handle pauses after your words. Notice what happens when you stop talking. Do they allow the space to exist, or immediately fill it with themselves? Signal. Inability to handle a pause. Inability to truly connect. 7. Repeated patterns. Pay attention to what the person repeats. Complaints, blame, justifications, or responsibility. Signal. Repetition is not random. It reflects habitual thinking. 8. Consistency. Notice how they speak, to you, about others, with others. Signal. Sudden shifts in tone or manner are a sign of instability. 9. Emotional load. Is there life behind the words? Empty speech tires. Living speech holds attention. Signal. Energy behind words reveals sincerity. 10. How you feel after the conversation. This is the most accurate indicator. Do you feel clearer, warmer, calmer, or heavier, tense, uncertain? Signal. Your body often understands before your mind does. Main takeaway. Do not analyze a person only with logic. Listen to the form, not just the content. People can lie with words, but rhythm, pauses, and attention are much harder to fake. Always pay attention to how a person reacts to someone else's achievements. This is one of the clearest and most reliable indicators of a person's inner world. What's remarkable is that it doesn't depend on upbringing, education, or social status. This test goes through any mask because in the moment when someone nearby achieves success, many people trigger deep emotional reactions, and it's very hard to fake. Genuine joy for another is a sign of inner fullness. Such a person does not feel threatened by someone else's light because they do not live in the shadow of doubt. They know their own value, and another person's success does not diminish it. On the contrary, it inspires them. Envy, belittling, sarcasm, even if hidden behind polite words like "good job, you just got lucky," is a clear signal of fear and inner insecurity. The tendency to immediately turn the conversation to themselves is another red flag. I first understood this in my childhood during a summer I spent with my grandfather in the countryside. Grandpa always said, "Olivia, watch how people celebrate others, not with their words, but with their actions and their eyes. There lies their honesty and their strength." That summer, there was a teenage girl in the neighborhood named Emily. She had a talent for making wooden toys, little horses and carriages, which she sold at the local market. One day, Emily won a regional craftsmanship contest, and everyone in town talked about how beautiful her work was. Grandpa and I were walking down the street when we overheard some adults commenting on her success. One neighbor, Mr. Peterson, praised her at first, but then added, "Well, that's all fine, but honestly, she probably just got lucky." Grandpa stopped, looked at him, and said, "Remember this, Olivia, that's how people behave who feel smaller than they are." Then there was another neighbor, Mr. Harris, a wise older man. He saw Emily showing her toys, and instead of comparing himself or saying lucky, he crouched down to her level, smiled, and said, "Emily, this is wonderful. I'm inspired by your work. You make me want to do better." I felt the difference immediately in my body. The way a person looks, smiles, stands beside another. You can tell right away if the joy is real or just pretended. Grandpa said, "Olivia, this lesson stays with you for life. People who celebrate others, they are strong, full, confident. Those who belittle others, they not only fear another's light, but live in the darkness of their own doubt." Since then, I've tried to notice these moments everywhere, at work, at meetings, in personal life. When someone gets a promotion, publishes a project, or takes a step toward their dream, observe who genuinely rejoices, who hides envy, and who tries to turn the conversation to themselves. The ability to see someone's reaction to another's success is almost magical. It doesn't require words, checks, documents, or long conversations. You immediately know who stands before you, and most importantly, it helps you choose who to build relationships with, whose ideas to trust, and whom to invest your time and energy in. Because true joy for another is not just an emotion, it is an inner principle that shows itself even in the smallest details. Those who rejoice sincerely live in harmony with themselves. Those who don't live in fear, doubt, and constant comparison. And that is what I learned from Grandpa and Mr. Harris. Another person's success is a mirror of the soul, and you can see character faster than from any words. Why it's important to notice someone's reaction to others' success. It's a mirror of character. Joy or envy for another person shows almost instantly and is very hard to fake. People can pretend with words, smiles, compliments, but their true reaction appears in the small details. Their gaze, facial expressions, gestures, intonation. If you learn to see these signals, you immediately understand who is honest and mature, and who lives in fear and comparison. It predicts behavior in difficult situations. People who genuinely celebrate others know how to support, collaborate, and share resources. Those who envy or belittle others tend to compete secretly, sabotage, or shift responsibility when faced with challenges. It helps you choose your circle. The emotional climate of your life directly depends on the people around you. If you are surrounded by those who feel envy and belittlement, you will experience anxiety and insecurity. If you are surrounded by people who sincerely feel inspired by others' achievements, you will grow, feel supported, and gain confidence. It's an indicator of inner confidence and maturity. A person who can calmly rejoice in another's success knows their own value. They are not afraid that someone will take their place, attention, or resources. Such people are usually resilient to stress and able to build long-term relationships and partnerships. It speeds up intuitive understanding of people. A mature person can quickly read from someone's reaction to another's success, who will be an ally, who will be a competitor, who is honest in words and actions. Sometimes, just a few minutes of observation are enough to understand. Can you trust this person? Should you build a relationship or do business with them? It teaches you your own maturity. By observing reactions and noticing them, you learn to be sincere and supportive yourself. This exercise trains emotional intelligence, self-control, and inner confidence. It is extremely important to pay attention to how a person behaves in unexpected situations, not when everything goes according to plan, not when they are smiling, polite, and trying to make a good impression, but precisely in the moment when something goes wrong, because in such moments a person no longer chooses a role, they reveal who they truly are. Once a woman I knew met a man. Their relationship developed quickly, almost without pauses or caution. Soon after, they were already living together in his rented apartment. The apartment was bright, spacious, and cozy. Large windows, the 14th floor, a feeling of air and height, the kind of place where it's easy to think, everything is going well, life is working out. And then one day, something happened, a situation she would remember for the rest of her life. That day, she was cleaning the apartment, calmly, casually, in a domestic rhythm. She was washing dishes, lost in her thoughts. When the water suddenly stopped, she left the dirty dishes in the sink, got distracted, and at that exact moment, her mother called. Her mother's voice was anxious, urgent. She needed to come immediately. Something had happened. My acquaintance began getting ready on autopilot. Her thoughts were already far away from the kitchen, from the faucet, from the apartment itself. She left without noticing that the hot water tap was still open. Several hours passed. Then her phone rang. It was her boyfriend. She answered, already expecting reproach, irritation, anger, but instead, she heard a calm, steady voice. He said, "You forgot to turn off the tap. We flooded the neighbors, several floors below. No accusations, no shouting, no pressure." When she returned to the apartment, reality was stronger than any words. There was so much water that it reached almost to her ankles. All 3 rooms and the kitchen were flooded. The floor had swollen and the heavy smell of dampness filled the air. At that moment, the neighbors began to arrive. Some were shouting, some were blaming, some spoke harshly, almost aggressively. And this is when she was surprised for the second time. Her partner stepped forward calmly, confidently. He listened to everyone. Some he gently but firmly asked to leave. Those who were more reasonable, he asked for help, to remove the water, to bring buckets and cloths. No hysteria, no hiding, no search for someone to blame. When the water was finally gone and the neighbors had left, the apartment became quiet. That was the moment she feared the most. Being alone with him. Inside, she felt tightness, the expectation of punishment, the fear of being humiliated, blamed, labeled as the guilty one. But something happened that she did not expect at all. He came closer. He hugged her. He kissed her and said, "This is nothing. We'll handle it. It's just a situation, not a disaster." In that moment, she understood more than she had through all their previous conversations combined. This story is not about water, and it's not about a flooded apartment. It's about character, about who a person becomes when a mistake is made, damage occurs, tension rises, comfort collapses. Some people, in such moments, shout, look for someone to blame, try to break another person to protect their ego. Others, however, hold the situation together. They don't deny the problem, but they don't turn it into a drama either. They separate the mistake from the person. And this is where maturity lives, because life is not a sequence of perfectly closed taps. Life is a constant stream of failures, errors, and unexpected turns. And the real question is always the same. Who is next to you when something goes wrong? Someone who destroys, or someone who stays grounded in reality and says, "We'll handle this." That is why it's so important to look not at words, but at how a person behaves in an unexpected situation, because that is where the truth is revealed. How a person reacts when things don't go according to plan, the moment when masks fall. When something goes wrong, a person no longer manages their image. They stop choosing the right words, stop shaping impressions, stop playing a role. They simply react. And in that reaction, their true nature appears. This is one of the most accurate ways to understand who is truly standing in front of you. Below are the key signs worth paying attention to. 1. Blame or acceptance of reality. What happens? Some people immediately look for someone to blame. Others first acknowledge the fact, yes, this happened. What it reveals, blame is a sign of emotional immaturity and inner instability. Acceptance is a sign of inner strength and self-support. A person who cannot tolerate a mistake cannot tolerate closeness either. 2. Tone of reaction, panic or presence. What happens? Pay attention not to the words, but to the tone. Does the voice rise? Do movements become rushed, sharp, chaotic? What it reveals, panic shows that a person loses connection with themselves at the first disruption. Presence shows the ability to stay grounded, even when things are uncomfortable. Calm is not the absence of emotion. It is the ability not to destroy the space around you. 3. Attitude toward the problem, drama or task. What happens? For some, every difficulty becomes a catastrophe. For others, it is simply a problem to be solved. What it reveals, a person who turns every challenge into a tragedy will live in a constant state of crisis, even when life is going well. A mature person does not deny the difficulty, but does not dramatize it either. 4. Treatment of others, attack or support. What happens? In stressful moments, some people hurt others with words. Others, on the contrary, hold the other person together. What it reveals, if someone destroys another person in moments of tension, they are not safe in long-term relationships. Support in crisis is not softness, it is inner stability. 5. Control or cooperation. What happens? Some people react to stress by tightening control, pressuring, commanding. Others seek cooperation and shared solutions. What it reveals, excessive control is rooted in fear. Cooperation is rooted in trust. In life and in people, a person who cannot remain in dialogue under pressure will either dominate or disappear. 6. Language patterns, accusation or clarity. What happens? Listen for phrases like, "You always," "This is your fault," "You ruined everything," versus, "Let's figure this out." What can we do now? What it reveals. Accusation is avoidance of responsibility. Clarity is the mark of an adult mind. 7. Speed of recovery. What happens? How long does it take for the person to regain balance? What it reveals. Losing temper once is human. Staying stuck in irritation is a sign of resistance to reality. Maturity is not a perfect reaction. It is the ability to return to balance. Final thought. When everything is easy, people look alike. When things fall apart, they are very different. If you want to understand someone, don't listen only to promises. Don't trust beautiful words. Don't rely on first impressions. Watch who they become when something breaks, because that is the moment when masks fall and the real person remains. Key 6. How a person relates to boundaries, their own and yours. This is one of the most accurate yet often overlooked indicators of character. Boundaries do not reveal upbringing or intelligence. They reveal a person's level of awareness, maturity, and respect for life. Why boundaries matter. A person may speak beautifully, Look confident, react calmly to others' success, behave with dignity in crisis. But if they do not respect boundaries, everything else will eventually collapse. Boundaries are not walls. They are the understanding of where I end, where the other begins, and where responsibility truly lies. 1. How a person responds to the word no. Observe this carefully. Say no calmly, without explanations, without justifications. What happens next is crucial. If they respect it, you are dealing with an adult. If they pressure, guilt trip, manipulate, you are dealing with someone who cannot hear another person. Truth, someone who respects your no respects you. 2. The need for explanations and justifications. People with weak boundaries demand explanations, act as if you owe them, experience your refusal as a personal insult. A mature person does not demand justification, does not intrude, does not question your right to choose. Important, the urge to control is not strength, it is fear. 3. How a person treats your time. Time is a form of life. Pay attention to whether a person is chronically late, interrupts you, ignores agreements, expects constant availability. What this reveals: respect for your time equals respect for your life. 4. Boundary violations disguised as care. One of the most dangerous forms, phrases like, "I'm just worried about you," "I know what's best for you, you won't manage without me." Translation: I do not see you as a separate individual. True care never takes away autonomy. 5. Boundaries in conflict. A mature person does not attack your identity, does not humiliate, does not aim for your most vulnerable places. An immature person strikes where it hurts most, uses your secrets as weapons, destroys in order to win. This is critical in close relationships. 6. Attitude toward your decisions. Notice whether a person respects your choices, even when they disagree. If being near someone makes you doubt yourself, lose confidence, feel guilty for your decisions, this is a signal not about you, about them. Final insight: a person who respects boundaries is safe, predictable, capable of intimacy. A person who violates boundaries may be charismatic, interesting, even seemingly kind, but next to them, you will slowly disappear. Closing thought: you can forgive a mistake, you can survive a crisis, you can learn to read speech, gaze, and reactions. But if someone does not see boundaries, you will always pay for it with yourself. And that is why the 6th key is the decisive one. When you look at a person through only one lens, it is easy to be mistaken. Words can deceive. First impressions can be rehearsed. Even good intentions can be temporary. That is why true understanding is never built on a single sign. It is built on patterns. These 6 keys are not about judging people. They are about seeing clearly. Let's bring them together. We began with the body, with how a person moves through space, because the body rarely lies. It reveals inner balance, confidence, and the ability to carry responsibility long before words appear. We move to the eyes, to the gaze, because the eyes show presence, openness, fear, avoidance, and sincerity. They reveal where a person is internally, with you, with themselves, or somewhere else entirely. Then we listen to speech. Not just what is said, but how. Tone, rhythm, pauses. The ability to listen and the difference between dialogue and monologue all reveal how a person thinks, feels, and relates to others. We looked at how someone reacts to another person's success, because joy for others is a sign of inner fullness, while envy, sarcasm, and comparison expose inner scarcity and insecurity. We observed behavior when things go wrong, because when plans collapse, masks fall, and in moments of pressure, a person reveals whether they destroy, panic, withdraw, or remain grounded and supportive. And finally, we arrived at boundaries, the most decisive key of all, because without respect for boundaries, nothing else holds. No connection, no trust, no intimacy can survive without them. The global truth. A person does not reveal themselves in perfect conditions. They reveal themselves when they are uncomfortable, when they are not admired, when they are not in control, when they do not benefit. Character is not who someone is when they are winning. Character is who they are when nothing is working in their favor. And the most important thing to remember, you are not here to analyze others to control them. You are here to choose wisely, to choose who you let close, who you trust, who you build with, and who you walk away from early before the cost becomes too high. Tomorrow, a new video will be released. If these reflections resonated with you, subscribe so you don't miss what comes next, because learning to see clearly changes everything.